Grand Rising, everyone. Natalie come to us. Spirit of Coffee, come cover you. Mm. All right, let's get started. So, reading from the Emerald Tablet Alchemy for Personal Transformation. Um, really talking about distillation and how to purify the soul, right? Is to isolate her. Alexandra philosophers Platonius, preventing her from attaching herself to other things and raise her from the things here below to intelligible entities. Also to wean her from the body. For in that case she is no longer sufficiently attached to it to be enslaved to it. So resembling a light which is not absorbed in a whirlwind of matter. Okay. So this too is part of chaos. If we think about it, chaos is really an interesting topic for most people. And we have chaos theory even where we're trying to understand like what is chaos, and it freaks people out. The chaos theory kind of freaks out, I believe, a lot of people, because what it does is it tells us, you know, is everything predetermined, and it tells us that perhaps it's not, that there's free will. But then there's this pattern that surfaces, and so we don't know what the pattern's going to be, right? And that's kind of what chaos theory is in a way, in a very simple way, simplistic way to describe it. So when we think about chaos theory, what we see is that we don't know what the pattern's going to be. We just have no idea. We can't even predict it. So there's no predictability in chaos theory, but we can say that the predictability we could probably say is that there will be some sort of pattern that arises from it. We get fractals out of this, right? And if you are look too close or you look too far, it looks like a bunch of chaos. You don't really know what's going on. And I think about this in like traffic, right? Or when we're flying. Let's say, for instance, and we're looking at traffic. When we're out on the road, it's like a big chaotic cluster, right? It doesn't look like it makes sense. There's maybe not some order. I mean, people are driving in their lanes, not really anymore. People are driving all over the place. But when you start to fly above and you can't really see the patterns of the streets, like, the streets run straight, you don't really see a pattern, basically. When you start to rise above in the plane and you look down, it looks like a bunch of ants, and you can see the order and the patterning. It's pretty crazy. I always kind of used to do that when I was in the plane, look down and be like, wow, it's just amazing how when you're down there and you're in it, it doesn't look as orderly as when you're looking from further away. So perspective is a big thing, right, with chaos theory. But what is this saying? This is saying that you shouldn't attach yourself, or if you want to isolate her, which is, I would say, the great mother, and to live fluidly, you have to disconnect her from matter. Matter is, we are matter, whoever's on here. And we are dense, and matter, when we're dense and we're trying to move through the world, it's not as easy, right? Moving our vessels through the world. Um, Trying to find that lightheartedness. Okay, so let's just go through this. The distillation of Raymond Lilly. Good morning, Lisa. No matter how low we have fallen, the process of distillation takes us to the highest level and purges us of ego and worldliness. You can almost think of it almost like altruism in a way. An example of spiritual process can be found in the life of renowned alchemist Raymond. Born in 1235 to a wealthy family in Spain, he rebuffed their attempts to get him to attend the university and become a popular poet, and became a popular poet instead, leading the romantic life. Uh, Lilly ended up a member of the royal court. Um, Always a handsome ladies' man, could never resist the temptations of the flesh, and constantly sought new liaisons among the board and commonly ladies of the Spanish court. Um, his indiscretions were so frequent that King James complained and suggested that he settle down and marry a lovely, wealthy woman who was seeking a husband. That he did, although it did not curb his appetite for women. He finally met his match in an extremely beautiful noblewoman who played a horrific trick on him. Though she was married, Lily openly flirted with this gorgeous woman and even followed her around on horseback. After being harassed for months, she agreed to meet him for a rendezvous and fantasized for days about the upcoming tourist. Um, when the day finally arrived, he found her waiting patiently for him, and he approached her tenderly. Just as he was about to place a kiss on her pouting lips, she ripped open her blouse and revealed an ulcerating and cancerous breast that gave off a gangrenous odor. As he turned away in revulsion, she cried out, "How much better would it be to have been for him to set his love on the Creator and win a more lasting prize?" He ran from the scene, overcame by shame and his pride forever crushed. So humiliating calcination him to face the futility of his materialistic existence. So we kind of see this story even the storylines gets played out, right? Because we talk about um beauty and vanity as one of the, right, we call it the sins. It's funny because if you're watching Devil's Advocate, I like to quote this movie a lot. At the end, he goes, "Vanity, my favorite sin," right? Um, that we are visual creatures and the way we look. Now, and we see this even with like Beauty and the Beast, right? It's the same kind of storyline narrative where the woman comes and she's not this beautiful thing, and he gets like, "Ugh, get away." He turns away and then he's forever cursed because of it, and she turns into this beautiful thing. Well, this is kind of opposite. She's beautiful and shows him, you know, the opposite. Here's this grotesque thing, and if you would have put your time into something that was long lasting, like your spirit or your spiritual journey, that would have actually yielded results. Okay. He faced his faculties of materialistic existence. High living courtesan soon renounced his descendant life. He divided his estate and moved to Mount Ronda near Majorca. I'm sorry. His life and lived his life as a hermit. During this period, deep introspection, he entered desolation, and he was overwhelmed by nightmares and religious visions that seemed to be directing him to the Arabic lands. During his separation phase, he identified purified essence being released in his soul and discovered a type of alchemy being practiced in Tunisian that shared many of the components of his dreams. So he taught himself Arabic and traveled to North Africa, where he joined the Sufi sect, learned spiritual alchemy. Here we go. Another thing about spiritual alchemy is that you can see alchemy is not a religion. It's not a religion. This is why I call myself a spiritual alchemist. But what it does is it allows us to open ourselves to the different religious processes. There are religious processes. Okay. There's a process within each religion. If you look at it, right? There's a procession, there's rites of passage, there's all these processes that happen that help us kind of go through our harder stages in life. If we looked at like the Catholic Church, for instance, you have baptism, you have your first Holy Communion, you have your marriage, you have all these things, right, that you go through is a process. And there's a process in every quote unquote religion or spiritual way of life. Like, for instance, Buddhism, which is not a religion, it's a spiritual way of life, but there's a process to it, right? The process being first there's suffering, there's a way out, the four noble truths, and it goes down and it goes on and on and on. Alchemy is a part of that. So as you can see, he's even stating that, right, that he went out and he joined the Sufi sect and learned spiritual alchemy. You see, you can learn alchemy through these different processes. They're all alchemy in motion because each one of them is looking at how do we actually purify the soul, the spirit, or how do we purify the spirit into soul? I think that's a better way to put it from a particular alchemic way of speaking about it, right? When we talk about alchemy, how do we purify that into pure light? How do we do that? What does the process look like? Okay. And so that's what he did. Um, And so he went to the Sufis and he learned spiritual alchemy. This esoteric training completed his personal conjunction of the soul and spirit. Now, the Sufis do something pretty cool. They spin really fast. And each religion or each cultural tradition or indigenous tradition or any tradition that we go back to, I don't want to say religious either, but all of these things had ceremony within them, and the ceremonies were there to ignite a spiritual, or entice a spiritual connection. Um, and so, what happens, right, with the Sufis is they spin really fast in circles, and it taps them into that spiritual connection. So we have drumming ceremonies, right? The natives would do drums, and that's how they connected into the divine, was through the drum ceremony. So we have ceremonies that we do, and there's ceremonies, and there's an alchemic process to each, I want to say, religion or spiritual process that we have. There's ways to connect into the divine, our divine self. Um, so he learned how to do that through the Sufis. Now you have your way of doing it. Meditation is one way, right? Buddhism talks about meditation, sitting still, all of that kind of stuff. People do hypnotherapy, people take psychedelics, right, to have these experiences. The reality is we can tap into it without psychedelics. We can have these experiences through other ways. Sometimes people will cut off the breath. Kundalini is all about breath work and how you use your breath to ignite that spiritual experience. So there's different ways to connect. And this is what drives me nuts is people fight about religion. There's no need to fight about it. Everybody that is religious, everybody who is following a process is really trying to connect to the divine. They're trying to find what their way is to connect to that divine experience. And to be whole and feel that wholeness, right? Or feel wholehearted and loved. So they're looking at these different sects and they're saying, well, what works for me? So there's different things to ignite those experiences. And that is, I call it alchemy in motion. Like for me, I do Kung Fu. Well, that is alchemy in motion. Sufis turn in circles, alchemy in motion. Drumming ceremonies, alchemy in motion. Sweat lodges, alchemy in motion. Meditation, alchemy in motion. Okay, so you're getting the point, right? That as a spiritual alchemist, you have the opportunity to tap into that spiritual connection through very different modalities, different ways of engaging. It's not just one way. The experience can be ignited through very several different outlets. Okay. So his fermentation took place in 1217 when he returned to the Mount Rhonda, entered the seventh month of constant prayer and meditation. So he also did the prayer and meditation. Some people also do fasting. That's a big one that ignites. We'll see this in a lot of spiritual people who we talk about today, like Jesus Christ did fasting, Buddha did fasting. Um, we have every religious practice talks about fasting. It's one way for you to connect to the divine as well. um so that's another way. Okay, always absorbed in prayer and conversing continually with angels who consolations he received had, which the souls can indeed realize but which his lips cannot worthily describe. um he was flooded with a warm light. He had visions such as revelation of Hermes. He beheld a vertical axis of reality and traveled to the above and below. He saw things emanate from one mind through the divine thought, finding expression in matter. As distillation of the experience began, he attempted to translate his outworldly experience into words so he could understand it. He named it the divine thoughts of archetypal forms, experienced the dignities of God, which he remarkably similar to the divine signatures of Jacob. Like Bohem, Lilly believed that they were based on the trinity of forces that were the causes of all phenomena. So the trinity being, um, as we said, the elements, right? The mercury, salt, and I can't remember what the other one is, but it's a combination of three things. And we say that two come together to make three. So really, one is really two, and two is really three in mathematics, and they're all combined together, and we have the Trinity. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, right, is the Trinity. They've taken it into different ways of exploring it. You have man, woman come together, have a baby. That's the Trinity. There's three. That's out of two comes three. And so he was able to tap into that. Here's the deal: when we start to tap into our divine nature, and I've talked about this before, literally what happens, these signatures that are ignited, the way that we engage it doesn't have words. So it's really hard. And this is where scientists are actually scratching their heads. They don't know what the hell to do. And I laugh about it, right? Because scientists have to have proof, they have to know. Good morning. I don't know who's just on here. Say good morning. Anyway, they just have to know. They have to know, they have to understand, and they don't know. That's the point. And it's kind of funny to me because when we talk about going to the above, which they call the above, which I wouldn't necessarily call it the above, but when we start to connect into that divine nature, okay, and we start to really tap in and really understand it, when we try to describe it, we can't put words on it, right? And this is why they talk about, you can't, when you say God's name, it's no longer God, right? So we put this label on this thing that we really can't put a label on. It's the same thing when we have our divine spiritual experiences. How do you communicate it? What words do you use? Sometimes there are no words that you can put on top of it to describe it. And even science itself is not able to describe the fullness of life in general and our experience and consciousness. They don't have a deep understanding of consciousness. They don't know how to describe it. They don't agree. They don't agree on quantum physics. These are all those bigger things that we will probably never understand and probably not supposed to, because it's beyond reason. It's not, there's no reason behind it, which is hard for most people because we want to rationalize, we want to reason, we want to we do. We attach ourselves. Now there is a place and space for reason and purpose, of course. It has a function for us. It's survival part, mostly, and then it extends beyond our survival. But the reality is that you can't rationalize it. There's just no words. Sometimes we bring back symbols. For me, when I connect to the divine, you have to ask yourself, like, when I do connect to that space, what is the message that I come back with? Some people come back with numbers. Some people come back with art. Some people come back with sacred geometry. Some people come back with, I mean, there's just different ways that it's expressed, but not necessarily expressed through words, because words are just the symbol of what the experience was. You can't fully describe the experience through symbols. I can't, even in my communication, I can't find a word close enough to my experience, because the reality is it's not the experience, it's a symbol of the experience. And that's all we're going to have, right? Jennifer Madrid, blessing upon you. I'm drawn to you, my beloved friend. Guidance reading. Send me a friend request or a message. Okay, Christina. Oh, okay. Um, Okay, so I don't know who this person is, but tell us what you do. Are you a reader? What do you, a tarot reader? What do you, tell us what you do? What are your services? Apparently you have services. So you're trying to sell something. What is it you're trying to sell? Tell us. Okay. Um, so as we tap into that, we bring back into this world creativity, and that's what it is. So there's no logic or reason. We look at paintings sometimes and they don't have a reason or a purpose, or they're just an expression of the self. We can try to put words on it, right, and say, oh well, they must have been thinking this, and this and that, and this is what it means to me. And the experience itself is captured in a picture, but the picture itself isn't the experience, you see. So it never can be, which is kind of unique and awesome in a way. It's really kind of awesome that we are able to experience this. Can we put words behind it? That becomes the harder part. Symbols don't tell us what the experience is completely, and we don't have a good enough language They say the fire letters, Arabic again, which was on here pretty close to it. Now we have English where we try to describe things, but really it's just a bunch of symbols put together. And then we're trying to describe what we see, like this is a coffee cup, but I can say that, but can you experience it? You could see it through here, but you're not touching it and feeling it like I am. I'm experiencing the mug itself. You're not. I'm only telling you it's that. You can only imagine what it feels like, but you're not really experiencing it. So you got to go out there. And so I guess the message is go out and experience life. That's really where it's happening. Go and experience, have these magical experiences, and maybe there's no need to put words on it, and rather just to be in the experience. Just be in the experience of life. See what that feels like without having to describe it. Just be with it. Okay, so there you go. And we will continue on this chapter, distillation of alchemy. Okay, so there you go. I love you guys. Have a fantastical day. I will see you all tomorrow. Bye bye.